Awesome.
And we are rolling. And welcome everyone to the first episode of Real Men Feel. I am Andy Grant. I'm a transformational energy coach, meaning I can tune in and read the energy of people and situations. And with that skill set, with that profession, I attend and lead lots of personal growth events and spiritual seminars and the like. And normally that attracts a lot of women. And over the past couple of years, I've seen more and more men in the audience, which is a very good thing. And also in my one-on-one clientele, for years, it has been primarily women. But in recent months, I've really been getting more nudges to create a space for men. And beginning last October, I started writing and thinking and blogging about what does it really mean to be a man? And common themes that showed up for me were authenticity, vulnerability, and being willing to feel. So that kind of is where this movement, this undefined, unknown movement that I'm calling Real Men Feel began. And I have done a couple workshops, live workshops just for men called To Be a Man this year. And I also lead a monthly support group for men in Massachusetts, which is where I live. But I also wanted to reach the planet. So we have a Facebook group called Real Men Feel. And now we are taking Real Men Feel here to Blab. And our plan is to do this twice a month. And cool. I think that's all the bookkeeping, the opening housework I wanted to get out of the way. So I want to introduce and welcome my friend and co-host, Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy. It's great to be here.
It is.
And like you, I started off my career very much as somebody who was always able to read energy and follow that energy in order to kind of help folks. I spent many years in the corporate world, and oftentimes in capacities that allowed me to use that particular gift, even though that was never the official thing that I was actually doing. But I inevitably found myself gravitating towards jobs and work that allowed me to really kind of basically be a problem solver. So when I left the corporate world and struck off on my own, that's exactly what I wound up doing, was becoming a what I would best term as a spiritual guide. And my focus has always been on emotional healing, happiness, energy reading, spiritual balancing. My nickname amongst my peers is the emotion emancipator, because I really do help folks emancipate their emotions, free their emotions, so they can be complete, whole human beings. Like you, I found that doing this work, and the vast majority of folks were, in fact, women that I worked with. Those in my audiences when I spoke, those who I worked with in group settings or in private settings, were typically women. I could understand that, because when you're talking about emancipating your emotions, women are very naturally, they gravitate toward that. But like you also, I found that there's a huge underserved population, which is us guys, men who are willing, and there are many men who are out there who are willing to step forward, to let go of all of these burdens that have been placed on them, either by societal or family conditioning or whatever else, and really step forward and become whole, complete, full men.
Right.
Because we are, after all, human beings, right?
Right. Before we're men, we're human.
We're human, exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of guys forget that. So again, our plan is to do this twice a month. It's 20 to 30 minutes. That's what we're shooting for. Your comments, your feedback, your participation, you can hop into an open seat. That's all welcome. Again, we have the Facebook group called Real Men Feel. If you just search Facebook for Real Men Feel, you can add comments and share things there in between shows. But for our premiere episode, we wanted to explore the notion of paternal relationships, the relationships between men and their fathers. And that is really because something that's come up for Appio in Appio's life. So would you like to share what's going on?
Sure, absolutely. Last week, actually, it's been almost 2 weeks now that my father transitioned. I prefer to use the term transition versus passed away, because in my experience, I've basically come to a point where I no longer look at death, or what we look at as death, as being actual death. I just look at literally as being a transition back from our physical focus back to our natural state, which is non-physical. And so, he to use the common term, he passed, or he transitioned a couple of weeks ago, and it was not unexpected, but at the same time, it was kind of feeling his absence. yes, I did feel a sense of loss because he was no longer physically here. So I couldn't just, hop in the car, go to Idaho Falls where he lives. I lived in Salt Lake City, so Idaho Falls is only a 4-hour drive for me. And not being able to do that all of a sudden was definitely something that I noticed and I abruptly felt. Simultaneously, I also look at his transition as being something very, very good. He was trapped in a body that was not cooperating with him. He was suffering a great deal physically. And even though his mind was sharp, you could tell how much he struggled and how he so much wanted to communicate and wasn't able to communicate as well as he wanted to. So, his passing was, for me, a welcome release. And for him, it was a welcome release too. I am now able to sense him on a much greater level than I ever could. And I can feel his presence. I can feel that he's so much happier. He's gone back to, he was always a very mischievous rascal. And, hearing all the stories from my cousins, because my dad was 10 years younger than his next youngest sibling. And so all his older siblings, they all got married and were having kids. And he was, of course, tapped to be the babysitter. He was hands down the best babysitter that they could have hoped for, because he was always getting right there in the thick of things, not only being part of the mischief, but oftentimes instigating it. And so they loved it when Uncle Emerson would come and take care of them. Now he's able to do that. He is being mischievous. He's causing all kinds of trouble. He's savoring every single moment. So I'm happy with him. But that's not to say that my relationship with him was not complicated and it wasn't fraught with its own issues. Truth is that my dad was not the greatest family man. He chose to become a father. He chose to get married. He chose to become a father. Those were choices that he consciously made, and he did so because he wanted to do so. But at the same time, I don't think he really fully understood or realized the responsibilities that came along with it. Being a dad, being a father, and a husband as well. So along with that came a slow and steady progression for him. The weight of the demands that were being placed on him for being a husband and a father, but most especially a father, really started to kind of crush his free spirit. And with time, he ended up just not being the same person. And he just kind of shut down and did everything he could to withdraw from those responsibilities. I honestly hardly saw my dad when I was growing up. I mean, I have some good memories, but for the most part, the most dominant memory that I have was of him not being there. Him choosing to go to the office and spend as much time at the office so he could be away, so he did not have to deal and be faced with the constant reminder that he had a family to take care of. So yeah, and when I was 15, he moved away permanently. He had left a couple of times and come back, but then when I was 15, he moved away permanently. There's this commune up in Whitefish, Montana that he decided to go ahead and join. I guess you could say a lot of remnants from the 60s movements and 60s ideology. And I didn't hear from him for almost a year. No phone calls, no nothing. And during that whole time, I found myself taking on the responsibility of not only blaming myself for somehow I was the one who caused him to just up and leave, but also taking on the responsibility of being my mom's emotional support, her surrogate husband. Yes, I had my older brother who was also very much a support, but he was also kind of one of those very self-sufficient guys who, he had his own thing. Whereas I felt I took on the responsibility, and this was my choice. I made the choice of taking on the responsibility for being my mom's support. Maybe not financially, but certainly emotionally, I was there. Right. And so that was kind of, in essence, what happened, and what the absence of a father, if you will, that absence of a relationship with my father really shaped my life a great deal.
Yeah, it's funny, some of the things you mentioned, like we had not talked about this, but a lot in common. So my parents divorced when I was 4 or 5. I have no memory of them living together. And my dad had a very troubled relationship with his father. His dad was angry and was abusive. And I found in most relationships, children will either try to model their parents exactly or go the exact opposite. So my dad tried to go the exact opposite. He wanted to be my best friend, not my father.
Right.
And he would tell me things that were meant to convey how much he loved me, but I didn't take it that way. So again, I was born in the late 60s, and my dad wanted to go to San Francisco and be a hippie. And he kept telling me from a very young age that you're the only reason I'm here. If it weren't for you, I'd go off in a commune. I'd go do whatever I want to do. I'd go join a biker gang. All the things I dreamed of, I'm not doing because how much I love you. But I just heard, oh, my dad's not doing what he wants because of me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though it was not intentioned, that's how the message came across.
Right.
I totally get that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you struck on something that was very interesting, and how we can always, we as human beings are really not that far removed from primates when it comes to learning life skills. We model our life skills. We model what we do based off of the behavior that we see. Now, yes, we are slightly better at making a choice of whether or not we want to go the same direction or the opposite direction. But yeah, it's kind of funny how you think that here we are, we think of ourselves as being the pinnacle of life on this planet, when truthfully we see this cycle repeated over and over and over again. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you how many conversations I've had with other guys about their relationships with their dads. The most common theme that I hear surfacing is the theme of the harsh dad who is absent, the harsh dad who was emotionally distant, the harsh dad who, while they have a fantastic relationship with their dad, they absolutely loved their dad, nevertheless was literally like an emotional iceberg. And there was no real connection there. And I mean, I personally have come up with any variety of reasons for that. But I don't think I will speculate on that here. And then we can always save that for a different blab.
Yeah. Well, I think like every generation, everyone passes on their best ways to survive to their offspring, their children. And again, for generations, men were not supposed to feel. Just stoic and, be the provider. Go out and work. Exactly. And I grew up, and you just same way, so empathic. I could, from a very young age, like I'm talking like second and third grade, picking up the energy of all the adults around me, kind of hated their life. Yeah. And I was like, well, why do I want to grow up and be an adult if everyone, just lives for the weekend and hates their job? And I'm like, oh, it just felt like such misery. But no one talked about it. They didn't share that they felt that way, but I could feel it. You could see it. And you mentioned something key. We model what we see. It's not what our parents tell us, not what your dad tells you. He can tell you, I love you all the time. But if he's acting a way that conflicts with that, you model what you see, not what someone says.
Yeah. I see the shifts nowadays. I certainly see that our society is moving in a direction, and probably a lot of this is the consequences of so many men having a love-hate relationship with their dads. They love their dads. They absolutely, appreciate them. And yet simultaneously, there's so many things that their dads did or did not do, more in the area of they did not do, that they want to do the very things that they felt were missing from their lives as they become fathers themselves. Even though I never had my own children, I have 2 stepsons, and I have a great relationship with them. I took the approach of having also, again, going after the modeling example and having observed many examples of, women who remarry and then the stepdad comes in, or there's a step parent involved. Oftentimes kids ended up, at least where I grew up, it was rare to see a relationship with a step parent or stepdad where that was actually good. In the vast majority of cases, the male children in particular really started to end up resenting and hating the stepfather, because the stepfather kind of was coming in and almost trying to take over that father role when they already had a father that they could relate to. So, when I wound up with stepkids of my own, I did my best not to go that route of trying to be the authority figure, of trying to make decisions. If anything I kind of let the biological parents take the lead. I would end up being the third party referee when there were when there were conflicts that were actually there.
Yeah.
And so for me, I felt like I had some experience being a father myself, because my stepkids came into my life when they were 11 and 14. Now they're both married. The older one has provided me with 2 phenomenal grandkids that I just absolutely love. But again, I'm watching how my oldest stepson now that he's a father is doing his best to try to not make the same mistakes that his biological dad made.
Yeah.
And he's being a lot more open. He's being a lot more approachable. He's being a lot more he is giving his son permission to be the best human being he can be and take whatever path he wants to take. And I'm so glad to see that.
Yeah.
So many of especially millennials who are becoming fathers are starting to really wake up to the fact that this is what it means to be a man, can in fact be very detrimental. Many of them are now waking up to this is something that I feel like I was born 25 years too early, because my attitude has always been, let the child take whatever path is going to make them happiest. Let the child make the decisions that's going to really kind of bring them into their fullness as a human being. And instead of trying to impose these roles that may not necessarily fit that particular child.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything evolves. We can see technology innovate and expand, and everyone gets excited, but so much of society doesn't allow what it means to be a man to evolve.
Yeah.
And they want to, like, masculinity peaked in the 1800s, and you should all be lumberjacks, and that's all it should be. And you shouldn't. There's some feelings you can have, and some you're not supposed to have. And yeah, if instead of all that, they just how to be happy was more important than how to be a man or how to be a woman. But just to be authentically you is the greatest freedom you can give to your children.
Exactly. And this business that there's a set rules. There is. There are these rules that you have to follow that constitute what's a man and what's not. We get so paranoid about being perceived as something less than a man, especially when it comes time to expressing emotion, being emotional, or just having feelings. Now, I had the benefit of having grown up in 2 different cultures. My dad's side of the family is Scottish, so typical white Anglo-Saxon Protestant upbringing there, or influence there. My mom is a Portuguese descent from Brazil. So I had the exposure to the Latin culture, and in Latin culture, men are very emotional. Men are they know how to express their feelings and so forth, but they have their own totally different set of rules of what constitutes a real man. One of them is that a real man, your ritual into adulthood is to take the son down when he turns 14 or 15, take him down to the local brothel so he could have his first experience with a prostitute. And I cannot begin to tell you how many guys that I know from throughout Latin America who are actually very traumatized by that experience.
Wow.
It's like, I'm not ready yet. There were some that were like, woohoo, let's go.
It's fun. Yeah, because that's one thing that's always been missing in American culture, the lack of rituals. Mm-hmm. The different religions have ceremonies to cross you into manhood, but our society as a whole doesn't. And I've read reports and studies that that's why gangs took off so strongly, because it gave you a ritual. It gave a way in and a way out, and gave you that family and that male bonding and all the things that an ideal relationship with your dad would give you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And even though what's really interesting is that was a ritual that I thought was just shocking when I first heard about it. Like you said, having some kind of a ritual is good. I mean, where I grew up in Salt Lake City, you do have, the influence of the LDS Church, of the Mormon Church. Here, the Mormons refer to themselves as LDS, Latter-day Saints. That's kind of like a local thing. But one of the things I really found was very fascinating about the church culture, because being Mormon is more than just being, having a set of beliefs. It is very much a way of life. And I always appreciate there really were a lot of rituals that were in place that were geared toward, creating traditions within families. And as I was growing up, I remember every year local congregations would have the father-son outing, which typically, involved going up to, some campsite somewhere away from the city and spending a couple of days up there, just the fathers and their sons, and just, typical male bonding stuff, and my dad, since he was never around, I never got to go on one of those outings. And by the time that I could, by the time that I was actually finally invited to go on one of those outings, I was no longer interested. So I never had the benefit of being able to create some kind of a ritual that would, create that kind of a bond with my father. And while rituals are good, while traditions are good, I've always been of the opinion, well, I'm even more so now of the opinion than I was previously, that we should also give ourselves permission to change rituals or discard traditions if they no longer serve us, or if they no longer create the relationship, the father-son relationship that's there, that you're after. Sometimes you have to adapt. Sometimes you need to create new rituals, new traditions. Tradition, between quotes, and being very flexible in that, in order to create the the relationship that you want with your offspring. Understanding that your offspring is not your possession, but rather your offspring is your just that, somebody else who has their own personality, somebody else who has their own mind.
Right, we should be able to change and let go and ignore and outgrow anything that doesn't serve us.
That's exactly correct.
I mean, that's what's taught to us, what structures society and the media and everything that gives it is at some level and at some time was meant to support us. Mm-hmm. But when it goes from, when support becomes a container and a trap, then that's when you've got to recognize that and be able to step beyond it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like the comment that we just got.
My son does not have his own mind, unfortunately.
Well, maybe I can understand.
Maybe he's never had the space to develop it and discover it, right? Is that possible?
Sure, absolutely. And there are times, there were times when I was dealing with my stepsons that I honestly thought the same thing. It's like, my gosh, it's like, are they actually thinking? Or are they just robots or what? I mean, can they think for themselves? I was ultimately surprised one time when I actually was having a conversation with my oldest stepson, when he came to me and he wanted to talk to me about something, and we ended up talking for a good 2 hours. I was blown away by how much he had thought about the subject, but not only that, how well he reasoned through it. I didn't have much to add to the conversation because, truthfully, he had given it so much thought and reasoned his way through it, and thought of all the different scenarios. I just kind of had to just sit back and listen to him and say, yes, I totally agree with you, or have you considered this particular perspective? But I mean, my input was very, very minimal, and it was incredible. So, but I understand the part about giving him space and leaving him alone in his room most of the day, not to bother him. But without knowing more of the details about your son, Trader, I could always, kind of tap into the emotional stream behind that, since that's what I do, and kind of get an idea to give you some guidance there if you'd like. I mean, I'm happy to do that.
And everyone listening and watching, welcome to hop in and take one of the open seats and really join in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tap in, if I may, Trader, to kind of help give you a little bit of guidance on there to see. What I'm getting is that There is something that is bothering your son, but he doesn't feel safe enough to be able to talk about it. He feels like I'm getting that he feels like he would be judged. You're right. He is very, very emotional. He's really he's very sensitive. And sensitive, not necessarily in a bad way. So please understand that when I use the word sensitive, it is sensitive to the energy that's around him. He's very intuitive. He's very intuitive, and there is something that is causing him a lot of distress, but he feels like he can't discuss it because there will be judgment that's there. If you can find a way to create a safe space for him so that he can open up, a safe space where he feels like he can open up without being judged and without being criticized, I think that there will be a lot of benefit that comes from that particular conversation.
Yeah, really. And instead of leaving him space, create a space of engagement so he's willing to talk and share. Because the biggest thing I got, and I think this is obvious, but maybe it's not, but when someone's crying all the time, it's because they're in pain. Mm-hmm. And so you can ask them, and from an open-hearted space of giving them support, do you want me to just leave you alone, versus assuming they want to be left alone? Mm-hmm. So if you can create a space where, just let them know whatever is going on with you, you can share it, right? There's no judgment. You're not in trouble, whatever, just share what's happening.
Right, absolutely. I completely agree. It's when you talk about a safe space is really where they feel like they can just share whatever it is. It's on.
Yeah, we don't mean physically, although you need to be physically safe. We're talking more emotionally safe.
An emotionally safe space.
Mm-hmm. Safe to share. Again, it's like what this prose called real men feel. And men need to feel at whatever age that man is, right? So, and your son is obviously feeling. If he's emotional and hiding and crying, he is feeling. But to verbalize, to be able to communicate it, can help it get out of him. Again, based on my own experience, there's probably a lot of self-judgment for him. Why am I crying all the time? Oh, no one understands me, and he just keeps feeding this endless loop. But a safe space to communicate with you or with someone else that's close to him is a way to get it out of him. And instead of when it's only in our head, we just ruminate and can make things worse. But when we can speak it and share it and be authentic and vulnerable, that's when our communication becomes healing.
Right. And that's where, why we're having these discussions, and we're really, really glad that you were able to jump in and join with the discussion, because it is important as men for our children to understand that, yes, we do feel, and that it's, safe for them to share and feel as much with us as it is with our spouses. So in the case, as you're saying, that with your wife he's fine, and he doesn't cry as much when he's around your wife. In my experience, and certainly what I'm picking up as well, is that he does feel emotionally safer with your wife, and so. For him to be able to open up with you, and I'm going to draw upon my own personal experience here. Okay, so that way I won't necessarily be tapping into him emotionally, but I'm going to give you an example from my own personal life. Even though my dad was very absent, the few times that I was able to talk to him, I didn't necessarily feel like I could open up with him in the same way that I can open up with my mom. Again, there were certain cultural influences there. There was this perception that, he was going to judge me. He was going to get angry with me. He was going to have a really harsh reaction with me. And so even though I had a passionate desire to speak to him to want to open up to him, I felt like I couldn't really do so because it was not safe. I was going to be judged. I was going to be yelled at. I was going to be called names and given labels and all that stuff. And so I really get a strong sense. I get a really, really strong sense that your son is in a very similar position. And again, this is not a reflection on you. This is not a reflection on the relationship that you actually have with him. I certainly believe that you have every intention of being the best father you possibly can, and you are doing the best you can with the tools and the knowledge that are available to you. Absolutely. And no, kudos to you for first of all, making the effort, and kudos to you also for being able to, for reaching out and looking for other answers, other ways of being able to approach him. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I am incredibly impressed that you're reaching out and you're looking and you're asking questions. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing the situation, because certainly, we want to be able to offer ideas, guidance, acceptance and so forth. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Just the comment is, I'm worried he won't turn out. And regardless of how that sentence ends, love him anyway.
Yeah.
That's the quickest way to create a safe space. And the notion of judgment and his fear of being judged by you, it doesn't even mean that you consciously said, that's an idiot position, son, or you're being stupid. It can be just so subtle. Like if he ever tried to talk to you and you just walked away, or you ignore, if he just has to have felt judged or fear of feeling judged. It doesn't have to be something that you're consciously aware of, but just to sit down and make that space and just open. I love you. I can tell that you're in pain, and I want you to know that you can talk to me about it, whatever it is. And
also and add on to that as well. I may not understand, but I want to understand, and I hope that you can trust me enough to help me understand.
Yeah.
Because really, I love you enough, and I love you unconditionally enough to be able to want to understand. So when you feel safe opening up to me, I want you to know that I will make the effort. And it may take time. It may, there may be baby steps. In fact, Stephen Covey, in his, signature book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he actually used an example of a man who is struggling to have a relationship with his son and to develop that relationship with his son. And basically, it took time. The principle, the principle behind the particular story that he shared was seek first to understand, and then to be understood. So, and you know what? That's awesome. That's really awesome that you never call him names, that you listen to him every time that he speaks. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Yes. I'm glad that you're working on it and that you are taking the baby steps. And that's exactly what you want to do.
Right.
Keep taking those baby steps.
Yeah. Don't stop. Even when it's frustrating, you just don't back up. Just keep going forward. Keep reminding him how supported he is, how much you love him, how whatever he's going through can be shared, and it'll be great. I
love it. And I love the fact that he's almost walking on his own now. And one important thing is that every child is going to be unique. Every child is going to be different. I certainly learned that with my 2 stepsons. I am seeing that with being very heavily involved in my grandchildren as well. I see that, and I mean my grandson, who's the oldest, he is totally opposite from my granddaughter. And one of the valuable lessons I've learned through my experience was that every child, when we take the time to get to know every child individually, and in this case your son, you're going to discover things about him that will just blow your mind. And the approach does have to be, an individual approach.
Yeah. And a lot of parents think that their role is to teach their children. And really, your children come to you to teach you. So be open to that, right?
Yes.
So know that whatever he's going through, there are many gifts and lessons for you to receive. It's not just a one-way teaching relationship. Right?
Absolutely, yes. There is knowledge which we can share with them, but ultimately, if we give them permission, to take what we share with them, our perspective, and either integrate it into their lives, or they're free to discard it if they want, and develop their own path, their own way of going about them. But as long as they know they are fully supported and fully aware of that the support is truly unconditional, I know from having watched my own stepsons going through some major challenges in their lives that they turn out just fine. And they surprise us. Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I love that. I love this. The discussion. That's really great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being a part and sharing with us here. And boy, we've been going for 35 minutes. This is the premier episode of Real Men Feel. Our goal and intention was to go 20 minutes, so we've already gone longer than that. I want to let you know that we'll be back live on March 8th. And at that time, we're going to explore what it was like for us to be empathic kids, to be young boys, to be young men, feeling and being more emotional than it seemed like we were supposed to. And it sounds like that might be a lot of what's going on with your son too. So, but I want to remind everyone, we have a Facebook group called Real Men Feel. It's open to the public. Come on in and share. Make suggestions or what you'd like to hear us talk about. Feel free to jump in anytime. But I think we'll wrap this up for this week. How do you feel, Appio?
I'm feeling great. I'm looking forward to next week. And Trader, if you want to reach out to Andy and me afterward as well, by all means, feel free to do so. We're happy to offer whatever ideas and support that we can. And please feel free to join the Facebook group, because that's exactly what it's there for. Right. Is that forum.
And earlier, it was when Appio was tuning in, he had asked if you were a sun psychic, and yeah, we both read energy, so Appio is very skilled to tune into the emotions of someone else, and that's what being an empath is all about. That's what we're going to really talk about in our next show. So, so again, thanks everyone for tuning in. I had a blast. I
did too.
I know Appio had a blast, so I hope all of you had at least a semi-blast.
Indeed.
So, thanks again.
You guys take care now. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty, bye.